Hello, this is Joe Trahan, welcoming you to the All Me podcast from the Taylor Hooton Foundation, whose mission is to enlighten the world to the truths about appearance and performance-enhancing substances. As the national leader on this subject, they communicate their educational messages through various methods, including this podcast. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone. This is Brian Parker, Director of Education for the Taylor Hooton Foundation, and I am back to be your host for today's episode. I'm excited to welcome you guys to another edition of our All Me podcast. Today, we're going to dive into the world of a very important education initiative that's going on up in the state of Rhode Island. It's known as Operation Clean Competition, which you guys will also hear me refer to as OCC throughout this episode. OCC is an educational partnership. It's between us, the Rhode Island Interscholastic League, as well as the Rhode Island Foundation. Together, we have the goal of educating Rhode Islanders about the realities of appearance and performance-enhancing substances. We also try to inspire healthy choices in the world of nutrition, as well as dietary supplements. So today I'm going to be talking to one of our friends from the Rhode Island Interscholastic League, which you will also hear me refer to as the RIIL. Mike Lunney, he's the Assistant Executive Director for the RIIL. He'll be our guest today. Before we speak to Mike, it's important that we lay the groundwork for this episode. So to be honest, this introduction is going to be a little bit longer than you guys might be used to. I want to introduce this talk by taking you guys back in time to 2007. So at that time, you guys might remember there was a growing number of steroid scandals going on in the world of sports. Sparked by these issues, there were a lot of federal authority groups that got together and they announced the largest crackdown on illegal steroids in our country's history. This became known as Operation RIIL. This investigation went on for about 18 months and they secured over 140 different search warrants to make this thing happen. The targets of this operation were the manufacturers of raw materials that make anabolic steroids and other illegal drugs. So the groups involved with this included the FBI, the IRS, the DEA. There was even governments of 9 other countries that got involved to help make this project happen. They went in, they investigated websites, underground labs that were producing these drugs all over North America. At the end of the day, the results were shocking. There was over 120 arrests that were made. There were 56 labs that were seized. There was over 11 million doses of steroids that were recovered. This was just the beginning. There were many large producers, many large operations that were all shut down. Even the DEA themselves, at the end of the day, they were stunned at the results. They said this was on a scale that they were not expecting whatsoever. It just so happens that one of these operations that was shut down happened in the state of Rhode Island. In Rhode Island, there was a Chinese corporation. They were called GeneScience. Their chief executives ended up being indicted on federal charges of smuggling illegal growth hormone into the U.S. GeneScience, the way they did this, they used email aliases, offshore bank accounts, a network of drug traffickers all across the country, and they illegally distributed millions of dollars worth of HGH for several years. After they pleaded guilty, the company had to pay back over $7 million in criminal forfeitures, but as part of a progressive order to this group, they also had to pay $3 million towards a clean competition fund to counter the effects of HGH and steroids. So the very same drugs they were selling, now they had to educate about the dangers of them. So this is where Operation Clean Competition comes into play. Those funds were then used to set up Operation Clean Competition. And now, as a result of this horribly negative story that happened all across our country, a positive impact is now being made in Rhode Island. So we are educating people all over the state about these drugs. We're inspiring them to achieve their goals the right way. So without further ado, let's talk to Mike and learn more about what Operation Clean Competition is all about. So first things first, Mike, good morning. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Oh, good morning. Thanks for having me.
You know, this interview is fun for me because you and I are on the phone a lot. I mean, Mike and I speak every other week or so, and now it's almost like everybody's listening to one of our phone calls. So we're basically letting everybody behind the curtain a little bit, which is fun to me. I'm excited to talk with you. So we're certainly going to give everyone all the information they can handle about Operation Clean Competition, but we got to start at the beginning with you. So you're the Assistant Executive Director for the RIIL. You've been there since 2011. So we're going to get into the Rhode Island Interscholastic League in just a bit, but I'm just curious myself a little bit about your background. So I want to kind of know a bit about where you grew up and went to school and kind of what your career path has been leading up to what you do now. So essentially what I'm asking you here is sum up your life story for us in just a couple of minutes, if that's even possible.
Sure. Well, I grew up in a great little town called Bristol, Rhode Island, and it's mostly known for its 4th of July celebration, which is the longest consecutive 4th of July celebration in the country. It's spanning over 230 years of celebrations. And, there probably is a couple 100,000 people that end up coming to Bristol every year. And, we've got a great little downtown area, and the parade route is the street lines are painted red, white, and blue. And it's a real patriotic town, but it's also a great little community. And it was an outstanding place for me to grow up. And there was, in walking distance, I had parks and a YMCA and a local theater and all kinds of things like that, a state park, beaches, really a cool little New England town to grow up in. And most importantly, from an athletic standpoint, it was very much a place where you could do a lot of different things and be exposed to a lot of different sports. So that was kind of my first, exposure to the athletic world. And Roger Williams University, which is also something that is based there, but it's also a place that was very special to me growing up and kind of piquing my interest in athletic administration, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But anyway, growing up in that town, we played a lot of different sports, and basketball was always my passion. And I was a 3-sport guy in high school. Football, basketball, and baseball player. And, basketball, but again, was always my passion. And I was able to fortunately go on to the University of New Hampshire and play Division I basketball for the Wildcats up there in Durham. And so that was kind of my career path. But I always had an interest in athletic administration, probably from a young age, and coaching. So as far as things were concerned, when I got to college, I really kind of focused my efforts into administration and wanted to get into coaching, which I was fortunate enough to do. After I graduated, I was named the assistant men's basketball coach at Roger Williams University in my hometown. And at the tender age of 23, I was actually named the head men's basketball coach at Roger Williams, which was an interesting thing. At the time, I was the youngest head basketball coach in the country in the NCAA. And, so that was quite an experience for me. So, I was always involved in athletics and had a passion for it. But what I learned from being at the college level was that, I think my passion has always been at the high school level. And so about 5 years in, I had an opportunity to interview for a athletic director's job and boys basketball coach at a town called Portsmouth High School. And through that experience, I stayed there for 16 years, and I coached basketball, ran student activities. I was the athletic director and got onto a lot of committees at the Interscholastic League level, just trying to get involved as much as I could to give back. And so through that experience, I was able to actually get into a situation where I was on the National Board of Directors for the NIAAA, which is the National Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association, did a term there. And so I don't think I really had a direct path or career goal to get into the Rhode Island Interscholastic League, but I think all the experiences that I had along the way helped me to get there. And then just an incredible opportunity opened up in 2011 at the league office, and I was fortunate enough to be chosen by our principals to serve the league and do a lot of things here. So it's been a lot of fun, but to me, it's been all student-centered and something that I've been really proud to be able to give back to our state.
I'm learning things about you that I didn't know. I mean, first off, your hometown sounds straight out of a movie script, so I need to drive by there next time I'm in the area. But number two, yeah, I didn't realize how much your athletic background went. I mean, it's a cool story, and I would imagine the dynamic of a 23-year-old coach coaching 20-year-old kids has got to be one that's a little bit different than people would be used to. And so I guess that's, I'm curious myself because I grew up, similar to you. Sports was always kind of my passion. I was always watching or playing something, played high school basketball just like you did. Was there a point in time when you were like, look, I love sports, but I think I can actually make a career out of this? And I think that's a transition not a lot of people make. I think we have a ton of people that are surrounded with sports at all times, but a small percentage of those actually go on to make a career. Was there something specific that happened, or was there a time where you were like, someone came up to you and said, look, you can actually work in this, and you were okay, like, let's give it a shot. Let's try coaching, let's try administration? I mean, when did that pendulum kind of swing from the playing side into the, I can work in this side?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think one of the biggest pieces I think I left out from my childhood was that my parents in town, they had a trophies and awards business. It's still going, by the way, and it's well over 50 years. But anyway, growing up in that environment, after school, we would always go down to the shop and hang around and, of course, help with anything we could. I learned how to engrave at a young age. And just being in that environment, it was interesting because all these people from the sports world were constantly coming in and out of our shop. And obviously because they're getting awards and playing in banquets, and whether it was, little leagues or, the university or yacht clubs, or it didn't really matter what it was, these people were kind of coming in and out all the time. So I was exposed to their careers and what they were doing. So, I think that had a big influence on me in saying that, hey, maybe I could have a career in athletics. And so, being a young, impressionable person, it was interesting to see these people come into our shop and interact with them, and which actually got me going into a stint where I was kind of a ball boy for the Roger Williams men's basketball team when I was a kid. And that's because their coach used to come in and out of the shop for different things. And so I spent a lot of my childhood down there chasing them around. And so I kind of always grew up in that environment. So it was a fun time.
Right. Yeah, you've been in it from an early age. Well, that's great. I mean, that's an awesome career path. Sounds like you've kind of had a career in mind for a long time, which is also unique and a special thing in my opinion. So that kind of takes us to the current day position you got at the Rhode Island Interscholastic League. I mean, I think on a national level, most people are pretty aware that all the states out there have some kind of league or some kind of association that manages all the high school athletics for whatever that specific state is. So in your case up in Rhode Island, can you explain to us a few things about what the RIIL is, what's the purpose and mission of the league, and then inside of that, what's kind of your role with the league as well?
Right. So the Rhode Island Interscholastic League is, again, a volunteer organization made up of our member school principals. And the way that state associations are made up, there are 51 in the country, and we all kind of fall under the umbrella of the National Federation of High Schools, the NFHS, which kind of provides support and resources for state associations to help administer their programs. But as far as our particular state association is concerned, we handle over 60 public, private, and parochial high schools in the state, and we serve over 36,000 students in our state. We have activities in about 30 sports. So we administer the rules, we provide education, student services, we run all the championships, we deal with all eligibility issues and concerns. So it's a real beehive of an office, and we're a small office. It's really Tom Mesnati, who's our executive director, and myself. And then we've got some support staff that help us, as well as a marketing director and a business manager. So, our office is very, very busy. We're very active. Personally, from my side of it, I oversee, I think it's about 16 or 17 of the sports that we have in the state. So there's a lot of day-to-day things that go on during the regular season that we provide services to our schools for, and then obviously plan for our championships. And the revenues that we were able to generate, help us to provide services back to our schools and support. And that's one of the things that the Operation Clean Competition and, kind of fits right into the model of what we're trying to accomplish, because it is about educational-based athletics. And that's a huge part of what we're trying to accomplish here in Rhode Island.
Right. You've done a good job kind of summing up what you do, because I've talked with you for a while and I know, how your office operates. When I ask you what your role is, I pretty much know that you wear a lot of hats. You guys are you're like us. Both our offices, I think, are maybe 5 people deep. So, you try to explain to people what you do and you sum it up as best you can, but every day is different. You always got something going on. I'm pretty aware of that as well. So, I mean, that's great. That's a perfect kind of foundation. I think we've got the listeners a good idea on the league and your background, and all that's important because it transitioned us straight into the work that you and I have been doing together. So as we mentioned before, the past 7 years, I mean, we've been partnering on this operation called Clean Competition. Still going strong, by the way. We're in the midst of the 7th year right now during the school year. And so from your point of view, can you explain to our audience, what OCC really is? And then also going back to your role, what role do you play in OCC as well?
Well, first of all, I want to thank the Taylor Hooton Foundation for being there for us, because when going back 7 years, I remember that the Rhode Island Foundation, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit of, actually came to us and was looking for a vehicle to get education out to our schools and basically the general community in our state about the dangers of performance enhancing drugs. And and at first we were a little bit hesitant because again we're a small office and we're so busy. We were really concerned about how we would be able to deliver the education. It was certainly something we were interested in doing, but we also didn't want to spread ourselves too thin to the point where we couldn't do a good job on behalf of the foundation and what their mission was with this program. So through that, we did a little research, and lo and behold, we found the Taylor Hooton Foundation that was out there that just was a perfect, marriage for us as far as the mission was concerned and what the foundation was trying to accomplish in our state. So we reached out and made a connection, which we're so happy we did, and we're able to put a program together that's really been unique, I believe, in our country, to really be able to provide a free program that deals directly with these kind of important issues and really get a message out that really was something that I believe needed to be constantly put out there just as much as sportsmanship or leadership or anything else that we do. Warning people about the dangers of these substances is such an important thing. And that's kind of how the whole thing got started. So, we were happy you were out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about timing sometimes, right? So I gave the listeners kind of a background story on how all this went down and how it all kind of kicked off. And we were there as an outlet and we've never looked back. And so, yeah, like Mike mentioned, I mean, this is essentially an educational campaign. It's all over the state of Rhode Island. And, together we go out and we educate anybody that we can about, dangers and realities of what these substances really are. So, I mean, I think that's a great place to start. And now the audience kind of knows that this education is happening all across your state. But if we go a little deeper, in your opinion, what is the ultimate goal of Operation Clean Competition? At the end of the day, why is it so important that this information is out there to students and their influencers all across the state?
Well, it's interesting from my own perspective of being, spending 16 years as an athletic director and being in a community that sports was very important to, and it's a competitive environment. And, it's one of those things where, kids and parents are constantly trying to not only, get to the next level, whether it's college or beyond, to play athletics, but it's also even being competitive on their own high school teams, that they are always looking for a way to improve themselves, which is natural. Yeah. But the important thing to me is that a lot of these things, and this is what occurred to me a long time ago, was a lot of these substances are just so easily attainable, which gives off the impression to parents and kids that they're safe. And, when you can buy things right over the counter and you really don't know what you're taking, it has an unbelievable impact on kids. And so for me, I mean, this is back in 1995, 96 was my first year at Portsmouth High School as an athletic director, and we had a very, very strong football tradition. And interestingly enough, I mean, even back then, one of the first issues or challenges that I had to tackle as an athletic administrator was that we had some well-intentioned community members that were on this crusade, I guess is the best way to put it, of trying to get our athletes onto supplements, creatines, and some of these other things that we didn't know anything about. And they were promoting it to our athletes. And, I'd walk through the locker room and I'd start seeing these canisters and different things that were around, and started poking around into like, hey, what are you doing? And started talking to parents, and then realizing that I said, do you really even know what this is? And there wasn't a lot of information out back then. So without even doing a ton of research, my thought process was that if you went 20 years back from 95 into the 70s, I mean, there were well-intentioned parents that were giving their kids anabolic steroids because they thought it was going to help them get into a better place, right, and they knew nothing about it. So we took a tact as a school district back then to actually put a policy in place as far back as the late 90s that our school district was not going to promote or encourage the use of anything other than a natural diet, just for the simple reason that we just didn't know enough about it. And we had some really serious conversations at school committee meetings and parent meetings about, hey, why shouldn't we do this? The people would say it's natural and all these kind of things. And the bottom line was, we said, look, we have no research or information that tells us that it's safe or not safe. So why take that chance?
Right.
And so it was something that was really important to us. And it was really, again, about education, but there wasn't a whole lot of information out there to be able to determine whether or not it was good or bad. So we took that tact as a school district, and I think that was an important step, because I think it at least pumped the brakes on a lot of people of just getting into a situation that they might have regretted.
Right. Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty progressive policy at that time, just because, yeah, everything was pretty popular. And I think most people, even today, still think that a lot of things sold in health food stores are all healthy. I mean, we know that's different through OCC. That's one of the things we educate on is being smart with supplements and how do we navigate that world. Like you said, it's not condemning it. It's just knowing some of the issues that are out there with regulation and other things going on. Let's reduce some liability on the school side of things, but also let's get them some information to help them navigate this. I think that's the point of this at the end of the day. Because like you said, everybody wants to get better. Everybody wants an edge, and they're going to look at all different ways to do that. If they're going to look into, appearance and performance enhancing substances, well, let's make sure they have the information needed before they make that choice. And then hopefully at the end of the day, they'll decide to achieve their goals the right way. I think that's kind of the end goal of what this thing is all about. Before we started talking, I gave the listeners a backstory of a big drug bust that wasn't just going on in Rhode Island. I mean, it happened nationwide, called Operation Raw Deal. There was one big bust that did happen in Rhode Island. For the listeners that sat through the intro, I will put a couple articles about that bust in the show notes so you can read more about it and get all the details you want. But when that bust happened, a lot of the funding that came out of that actually went to education, and it went to a group called the Rhode Island Foundation, which you've alluded to already. So let's connect the dots here for our listeners just a little bit. So OCC is managed in a campaign by the Rhode Island Interscholastic League, but it's also funded by a grant from a group called the Rhode Island Foundation. So saying all that, I know you don't work for the foundation, so you don't need to go into a lot of depth here. But can you give a brief overview of what the Rhode Island Foundation does and what role they play in making Operation Clean Competition happen?
Yeah, it's actually a very great foundation in our state, and there are about 1,000 of these types of foundations across the country, and they're called, they're community foundations, and they're made up of charitable funds that are established by, many, many generous donors that are out there. And then, so for instance, if people start memorial scholarship type funds and they do some fundraising and they want to be able to have those funds continue years after someone passes away, they might raise some money and give it to the foundation, and then they'll manage those funds for them in order to keep those things going. But they, so they'll do small little scholarship type things out there, or just take, huge donations from people that really want to earmark it in a certain way. But in this particular case, there was that court case that was settled, and the money went to the foundation for this specific purpose. So they're not really into actually, performing the tasks that it takes for these funds to do their job, but they try to seek out people and organizations that can help do that. And that's exactly what happened in this case, was that the money was there. It needed to be used in this purpose, and they reached out to us because they knew us as the state high school association in Rhode Island, and felt like we were the ones that could be the vehicle to get that done. And so that's a little bit about the foundation and what they do. So they're a tremendous organization. They help a lot of people in our state each year.
Yeah, they really do tremendous work. There's no doubt about that. I mean, essentially all this wouldn't be happening without the foundation. So for anyone listening, the Rhode Island Foundation, I mean, huge shout out to you, because this is just tremendous support that they've given to make this happen. We wouldn't be doing it without you. Even because of their support, this program's expanded. It's grown. Like we said, this has been going on for year 7 now. So, I mean, a little bit about how this program has grown. When we first got started, we made a very conscious effort to educate students at the high school level. That's where we went out and did our programming at. But now on year 7, it's much bigger than that. So can you elaborate? I mean, who's eligible for an OCC program?
Well, right. So obviously our mission perspective is that we deal with high schools in our state. But as far as this is concerned, this particular grant can be used not just for high schools. It can be used for, middle school level, community organizations, YMCAs, Boys and Girls Clubs, church groups, really anyone that might want to have a program at their organization or to their constituents that can help spread this message. So I know we've expanded out to Bryant University at the college level. So we're not restrictive to just the high school level, and we're trying to get this message out as best we can. And as we've had in our discussions in our, biweekly phone calls, is that, where do you start to try to change the attitude and behavior of people? And for us, we've been starting to really delve into, hey, let's try to get to the parents of the younger kids, because they're just starting their athletic journeys. And again, they're being exposed to so many different things out there, and having this voice and having this education program that they can just awaken to the reality of what's out there is so important. So as far as expanding our program, I think that's an area that is kind of uncharted territory for us that we need to explore a little more.
Yeah, it's a huge part of this whole equation. At least on our side as a foundation, we educate students all the time. I would say that's a large majority of who we get in front of. But we always tell schools or whatever group it may be, look, if you want to get your parents together, your staff, your coaches, administration together, let's talk with them too, because that's the front line. They're the ones dealing with students on a day-to-day, year-to-year basis. They're also the ones that can have those conversations with students when the time is right, like you alluded to. And so hopefully it ends up preventing a lot of the issues that we talked about. So I think both sides of the coin are equally important in regards to this education. And I'm with you. I think that's another route that we'll just continue to grow this thing even more and more as we keep going. I want to talk about these programs just a little bit more. If anyone's familiar with our foundation, you kind of know the topics that we educate on during our presentations, but it's very similar with the OCC presentations. Me being someone who's always curious about what people take away from our talks. When you first started learning about some of the information that we are out there talking about, what were some of the things that stuck out to you? What were you surprised to learn about when we first started doing this whole campaign?
That's interesting, because I think that, listening to some of the talks and interacting with the parents is just how easily accessible these things are, and how casual, parents and kids just decide to, put these things into their bodies. That just was it. And I can totally understand the mindset, because the advertisements, the promotion, it almost tricks you into thinking that it's just a natural thing that you don't have to worry about. And, but on the other side of it, as a parent, I've got a daughter that's a senior in high school this year, and she's played basketball and volleyball and different things, and just being able to have those conversations with her, she even comes across different things that she's like, hey, some people are talking about this or some other particular substance, and opening up those conversations. It's just the internet, social media, it can be a really scary place for some kids to get into, because they just, don't think twice about things, and they believe everything. So having that alternate voice out there coming at them from an educational standpoint, just to me makes me feel good that we can provide that type of opportunity for our communities, for our schools, just to have that other side out there to offset the bombardment that they get on the internet and everywhere else.
Yeah, moral of the story is this stuff is out there, right? We all know the supplement stuff's out there, that's accessible, and that's a different beast and one we've got to navigate through. But even the anabolic steroids and the hormone side of stuff, that's out there too. Our students are seeing it. It's in schools, and I think we know that, and you guys know that, and that's why we've all kind of said, hey, look, this is important. It continues to be important because it continues to be accessible. That's why we keep doing this, right? So let's take that idea a little bit further and go into some of the feedback that you and I have both received from this program. I've been on the front line of this thing since day one. I could tell you countless stories of lives we've impacted over these 7 years. Some of the feedback that we gained from these programs has even helped us. We've tweaked our programs over the years because of OCC. So on your side of the coin, what's some of the feedback that you've gotten back from schools about this? Have you heard from people that have seen this program? Do you have any kind of stories about people that have impacted? I'm curious of what you guys may have heard back from people that have brought this in.
Yeah, there's an obvious impact from the parent level in that they just have a much greater awareness in our state now of what's really out there and the cautions that they need to take with their own kids. So I think that's vital. But on the other side of it, I think it's also impacted the way that our athletic departments, our schools have focused a little more on this, because again, you're into the day-to-day grind of your schedules of hiring coaches and bringing people in, and the education piece is sometimes lags behind. And our athletic directors, I know, have so appreciated this, because they're mandated to have parent meetings and, before each season, and having the opportunity to, spread a different message to their communities has been an eye-opener. And it's just something they never thought about. So I think since this program has been instituted in our state, I think it's on the forefront of their thinking. So as, situations might develop, they know this program's there to help. And so to me, the feedback has been totally positive I know that, the word of mouth is obviously a great thing. And our athletic departments and our principals and our athletic directors and our coaches have such a positive influence on the youth level in the communities that educating them first helps, because they're down talking to those people and saying that, hey, there's a program out there if you want to bring them in, which has helped. So we've, through our own promotion, through our own advertisement, we're trying to get the message to as many facets of the community as possible so that they're aware and they've got the information that they need.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. The response has been tremendous, especially from a lot of the administration. Like you said, I think before OCC was out there, this wasn't something that they were educating on all that much, and that's not abnormal. It's a topic that doesn't get discussed as much as it should, but once they've seen it, it's really been awesome to see how many schools continue to bring it back, right? Every year they have new students come in and they see the need to get them this information. And so I could tell you a handful, tons of schools that say, hey, look, let's do this every year. As long as the program keeps going, we see the value in the message, but let's keep bringing it back. And that's really been refreshing to see and been very rewarding to continue to do that work. So I want to transition from that to outside of Rhode Island just a little bit. I kind of want to look at this big picture because as far as we know, Rhode Island's the only state out there that has a program like this set up, right? I think both of us could agree that a program like this, I mean, it can certainly be done in other states as well outside of Rhode Island. So from your point of view, working in a league like this, how do we get other states to follow this path? I mean, is there advice that you would give somebody to some other state association about setting up a program like this? Can it be done? If so, how do we get it started?
That's an interesting question, but I think that's already started as far as our perspective is concerned. One of the nice things about state associations is that, there really only is 51 in the whole country. And one of the unique things is that every year we have a summer meeting where all the state associations come together at the National Federation of High Schools summer meeting. And it's a great time for us to sit down and network. And these are the types of topics that we talk about because, there are unique things going on in every state and we share our ideas. And so, we've already begun that process of speaking to, and we've even presented at some of these meetings, what we're doing here in Operation Clean Competition and, our relationship with the Taylor Hooton Foundation. So, the word is getting out there. I think the challenge is maybe in some of the bigger states is, again, getting the funding to get the message to the right people and communicating that it's available. Sometimes I think one of the things that's so great about our state is that we are small and that we're able to meet face to face with our schools, with our administrators, with our coaches. So we can deliver a direct message to them that they can in turn bring back to their schools and communities. So there are some challenges out there, I think, to getting to the states. But I will say that conversation's already started. And I'm proud to say that our state is at the forefront of that. So we're just bringing that message, to our counterparts and to our colleagues and hoping that they'll pick up the ball and run with it.
Yeah, that's great to hear. We appreciate you guys telling others about this work. We tell as many people as that'll listen about the work we do up in Rhode Island because it's a huge part of what we get to do every year. And we know the number of lives that we've impacted over the years. It's really a tremendous partnership that we'd love to see it expand in other states. And I think we'll get there. The longer we stay at this, the more people are aware of the issues going on. I think the education will continue to grow. To take this right back to your state that you alluded to, if I have any questions about Operation Clean Competition and I am in Rhode Island, how do I get them answered, right? If I'm a group in Rhode Island, I've heard this podcast and maybe I want to bring this program in and I haven't before, how do I go about setting that up?
Well, there's a few ways. The most direct way would be to contact our office directly, which we'd be happy to direct you in the right spot. And our phone number is 401-272-9844. The other way is through our website, www.RIIL.org. And you can click on our initiatives tab, and there's a link there to Operation Clean Competition, which has a lot of information about the program. Or if you want to go directly to the OCC website, it's www.operationcleancomp.com.
Perfect. I will place both those websites. I will place your number in the show notes as well. I will give anyone all the contact information they would need so our audience can go online and learn more about this initiative. And if you are a school in Rhode Island, please reach out to us, through the contact info Mike just gave you. We are doing these programs pretty much year-round during the school year. We're up there almost every single month. We would love to schedule a presentation for you guys. So please take advantage of that, and we'll get you all the info that you need. So, Mike, we're going to start to wrap this thing up. I promise. Before we do that, it's curveball question time. If you don't know what that means, on these podcasts, we like to ask our guests a couple of questions that are honestly just pretty random, that don't have a whole lot to do with the topic at hand, but it allows our audience some time to get to know you on a different level. So I have a couple questions that I didn't send you that hopefully you feel good talking about. I want to start with one that kind of goes back to our initial topic, and that's working in sports. So people don't know this about me. Before I started working with the foundation, with the Taylor Hooton Foundation, I was working in sports as well. I studied sports management in school. I've always been around that world, even before doing what I do now. When I used to tell people what I did for a living, I would get a lot of different reactions. I will tell you that a lot of people, when I told them what I did, they thought it was a lot more glamorous than it actually was, right? So you're someone that's worked in sports for a long time. You know what it's actually like being in that world. What advice would you give someone, to a young person that's thinking about getting into athletics as a career?
Well, it's a big question. And again, depending on what level, first of all, it's a great career. It's very fulfilling. I think if you're getting into it, and especially if you want to be a coach or an administrator, especially at the high school level, you've got to have a passion for helping kids. And I think that's the first advice I would give them, is that, to me, it's not a job, it's a lifestyle. And I think a lot of people that I think work in the sports profession know that hours don't mean anything, and you just kind of do the job and you go above and beyond. You give up a lot of nights and weekends and different things to provide opportunities for kids. And so for giving advice to somebody that's getting into it, it's an absolutely fabulous career. There are a lot of challenges with it. There are a lot of times that it's not glamorous. I can tell you that. People see us out at championships and everyone's happy and different things. They say, geez, what a great job you have. But then there's also a lot of day-to-day stuff that isn't so much fun that you have to deal with. But that's like that in any profession. But, to me, it's always been about, serving our kids and providing them opportunities to participate. And one of the things that I always, try to promote, whether to our parents and everything, is that everyone's always looking at their destination, about where they're going. They're trying to get to be a college athlete. They're trying to get to be maybe a professional athlete. That's obviously, those goals are there, but they forget about the journey, and they don't realize that their high school years and those participation opportunities that they have in athletics is in many ways the best times of their lives. Being able to do things with kids that they grew up with, being part of a team, the educational value of all those things. It's such an absolute joy to watch kids and communities come together, to participate. So I can certainly see how a lot of people want to be in that environment. It's a lot of work, but it's also very fulfilling.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, where you have to have a passion for it outside of just the sport itself, right? I worked in baseball for a few years. Everybody always told me, look, if you want to watch baseball, don't work in baseball, because you're never going to see it, right? Because your role is to make it happen. So if you don't have the passion of wanting to make that happen and wanting to make that impact, that grind can wear on you a bit, right? So I think it's got to go deeper than just an interest in athletics, and it sounds like that's how it was for you, and that's why you've been able to take it where you have today. All right, last question. So you work with high schoolers every single day. You work with high schoolers even more than I do. I've spoken to high schoolers for almost a decade now. I personally know that high schoolers have changed just in that decade alone. I am quite positive you've seen change in recent years with the students that you work with every day. So what changes have you seen? How are high schoolers different than they were 10, 15 years ago? What are the pros and cons of this generation? What are the challenges you face with them now? And what are the things you love about the current generation of high schoolers?
Well, in a lot of ways, I think kids are the same. But if you rewind back to before cell phones and before the internet, I just think that, kids were out in their communities working together and communicating with each other. So I think technology has been one of the biggest challenges that has impacted kids today, because they're so consumed with their phones and social media and all those things that are happening, which in some ways can be very, very good, but in other ways they just don't communicate with each other. I mean, Tom Mezzanotte and I talk about this all the time. We'll go out and we'll see kids interacting and they're friends, and they'll be sitting across from each other at a table, and yet they're on their phones and they're not even looking at each other. And so we jokingly always say that, Jesus, do you think that they're talking to each other right now just through their phones? And so, I mean, those are challenges I know that coaches have with kids today, is getting them to stay focused and stay connected to each other. I mean, I tell a funny story as a coach, in this generation. I grew up in a time where we were out in the parks and we would learn to, play pickup, and we'd organize things, and we'd have conflict resolution, and we were able to, do all these things on our own. When I first got to Portsmouth High School as a basketball coach, we were having an open gym, and I had a bunch of kids from my team that came in that I didn't know very well. And I said, hey guys, look, I got to do some things in my office. Go in the gym and just play some pickup. And I went in my office, and it was about 15 minutes later, and I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear sneakers squeaking or balls bouncing. So I went back in, and I said, and they were all standing around. I said, what are you guys doing? And they were struggling just to pick a team to get going. And so it was an interesting thing to me. So it was something that we had to talk about from a leadership standpoint, that, we've got to do more with our kids today to develop them, their leadership skills and their communication skills. But I can tell you, though, that the part that hasn't changed is their passion for wanting to succeed, and the way that they compete and their athletic ability is just off the charts. I just think it's just changed so much over the last 20 years. They're so much more athletic and gifted overall. So, it certainly is a fun environment, and it's a great place to come every day.
Yeah, the communication, that's what I've seen too. It's just it's a whole different beast. Technology is a wonderful thing. Sometimes it's a terrible thing. But at the end of the day, it's not going anywhere. So it's, how do we work with that? That's one of the things we've done as a foundation, is we continue to tweak what we do every single day to communicate with them and get on their level. Because if you don't get on their level, you're not going to get through to them. So I think that's a big difference. I think it'll continue to evolve. And I know it's one of the things you guys face and we do as well. All right, Mike. Well, let's wrap this up. We did it. We got through it. Together, our groups, I mean, look, we've impacted so many lives through Operation Clean Competition. I couldn't even give you a number, but I know it's a lot, right? And if you're listening to this and you're a group outside of Rhode Island, look, don't worry. Our assembly programs from the Taylor Hooton Foundation will go anywhere. If you're a group out there, you're interested in learning a lot about the same issues Mike and I have been talking about, and that Mike and I spread across Rhode Island, just give it a shout. Go to our website at taylorhooton.org. You can learn all about what we do. Saying that, to bring that back to Rhode Island, Mike, I know our listeners learned a lot from you today. This partnership in Rhode Island, look, it's one that's truly, truly special to us. I'm not just saying that. It's something that we absolutely love doing. So I'm speaking for our entire team when I say this. I know Rhode Island's a second home to us at this point. The difference we've made together, I just can't be measured. So thanks to you, thanks to all the rest of the team up there that makes all this happen, that works on this every single day. And thanks for you today for spending a little bit of time with us. We truly appreciate you coming on.
Well, I certainly appreciate the opportunity. And let me just take, 1 second to thank you guys and the Hooton Foundation and everyone involved with it. It's been such a great partnership, and I know it's going to continue. And, your dedication to your mission and spreading this message is so important, not just to us, but to all. And the job that you do is so tremendous. And I certainly recommend this. And I try to promote this wherever I go, because I think it's that important. And I think it has that big of an impact. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Hey, we appreciate the kind words, Mike. Thanks again for everything. We will talk again soon, I have no doubt.
Well, that's it for today's show. Thanks for listening to the All Me podcast from the Taylor Hooton Foundation, a nonprofit organization leading a national campaign to enlighten people to the truths about appearance and performance-enhancing substances and inspiring people to live and compete without the use of these substances. Please be sure to subscribe to our podcast and tune in to our next episode.